I've not worked out how to not think that I'm a garbage can.
Yeah.
At least I'm a garbage can, not a garbage can't. So I will take that with a thank you and just bow out.
Good job. That you did really good at that.
Welcome to Pixel Therapy, the video game podcast where we look at the games we play through the lens of the player, where what you play is just as important as how you play it, and where emotional intelligence is a critical stat. Every other week, we bring on a guest who may or may not consider themselves a gamer to discuss one of the games that made them and changed them, and all the feelings they have about our favorite pastime. I'm your co-host, Jamie, pronouns she, her.
And I'm your co-host, Spencer, pronouns they, them.
And this is Pixel Therapy. So pull up an armchair, feel free to lie down on the couch, and let's talk about our feelings. Spencer, it's the first episode of not only a new month, but a new year, and that means it's time for our monthly Patreon shoutouts. This is our special monthly shoutout, thank you, that goes to anyone subscribing on Patreon at the name in the credits tier or above. For the month of December, those lovely Patreon supporters that we're shouting out are Adiyinka, Araromi, and Val. Woo, 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 woo.
Woo-woo.
Thank you,
Thank
Yinka and Val, for your support. We really, really appreciate it. You both are awesome. And we couldn't do this without you. If you want to get your name in the credits, you random listener who's not Yinka or Val, head over to patreon.com/pixeltherapypod and become a patron for perks like monthly bonus episodes, opportunities to submit questions and topics for the show, and even more. Even more.
I just love that this little community has doubled.
Literally doubled in size. Yeah. So thank you both. Yinka
Our
and
benefactors.
Val. Our benefactors. Yes. So today, Spencer and I have been on holiday break here in the old United States of America, enjoying some time off, some
party in the USA, they say.
Yeah, lots of parties. Not really because of COVID. Mostly just, it's been a party for us gamers who've just been sitting at home inside, playing a lot of video games. So Spencer, what have you been playing over the holiday break?
Well, okay. First, oh my God, excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm okay. I was just the air, you know. I just want to mention real quick, speaking of the air, Christmas gift for myself. I guess I'm an adult now, but I did buy myself an air purifier. I don't know, call it COVID consciousness, call it New Year's resolution. I just really wanted to, actually, you know what it was? I was on Instagram. This is pure influencer marketing. Courtney Craven, shout out. They, our friend and the co-founder of caniplaythat.com, which is an amazing resource for gaming accessibility stuff. Articles, reviews. But anyway, they posted on Instagram and Twitter saying, I bought an air filter and in under an hour, it cleaned the air in my apartment. And I just really wanted that. So I bought an air filter. And I have to say, I can tell the difference. I literally walk in the room where the air filter is and the air just feels better. And the living room is where I do my gaming, and so I want my environment to be just so. So
you want to be breathing.
Immerse.
If you're going to be stuck indoors, you might as well be breathing the freshest air possible, right?
Exactly. It's my new normal. But yeah, if anyone needs air cleaning recommendations, DM us on Twitter, Pixel Therapy Pod.
Yeah, I mean, I will admit that I also have an air filter and have had one for many years.
Really?
Yeah.
I've been sleeping on this game.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I think it was like the first Christmas that my partner and I realized we were officially adults. His parents got us a vacuum cleaner and an air filter for Christmas, and we were the most excited about those gifts that we have been in a long time. And we realized, like, oh shit, we're grown-ups.
Cleaning the ground and the air. It just feels good.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I've been playing with that. But anyway, okay. Games, right. This is a video game podcast. So games I've been playing over the holidays. Well, okay. Assassin's Creed Valhalla.
Yes.
I've been playing that game for about 45 hours now.
Just a casual work week.
Just a light 45 hour. Oh yeah, that's what I've been doing all week. There's my week. For folks who haven't played the game or have been hearing about it, you play as Eivor, who is a Vikinger. They're a Viking, and they start in Norway, but then they and their brother decide to set sail for England and see what riches may await them. So it's definitely like a conquest. It's kind of, I was sort of surprised by the sort of land growing your empire kind of nature of it. Like, it's almost a little civilization-y. Like, there's just these little aspects of, I think folks who have played Red Dead Redemption 2 might be fans of this aspect of like building your settlement. You land in England, you build your settlement, you're raiding. There's a mix of like using your longship with your warriors to raid places for supplies, to mastering everything from an axe to a longsword to a spear, and your bow and arrows.
Specifically like Catholic churches, right?
Right. Yes, we are pagans and we are pillaging Catholic churches, but honestly, F them. Like,
yeah, no, I think it's great.
I feel like I want to claim AC Valhalla for the queer community, and let me tell you why. First of all, let me back up. I kind of just jumped into the mechanics of this game, but let me just back up a little bit.
Yeah, rewind a little bit.
So Eivor, the game opens and you are this little person with a shaved head named Eivor. You're a little child and you're in a great feast hall. Your dad's a Jarl who's like the boss of all the Vikings, and he's forming an alliance with another king of Vikings, and everything's great. You're partying. You get attacked. You get fucking attacked. Eivor is a kid, so they're told to wait in the longhouse while their parents go out and they're fighting off these invading Vikings, and it's helmed by Kjotve the Cruel, who's this terrible guy.
He's like 20 feet tall. Why is he so tall? He's
like so fucking tall. He just comes, crashes this dinner. He's attacking everybody. So Vikings, it's called Valhalla, right? Okay, I'm not an expert, but from what I've learned from God of War and now Assassin's Creed, what I can tell you is that Valhalla is the place where warriors who die gloriously in battle go. It's the
I think that's right.
Version of the afterlife. It's a great feast at Odin's table, and they're there chilling because everyone who dies in battle gets recruited to the great army, who will be there waiting at the table when Ragnarok, the end of days, comes, and they'll be there fighting. So it's like a good place to go for a Viking. What you don't want to do is die a dishonorable death, like of sickness and old age, like fuck those, or worse, like dying like from behind, or like just like you don't want to die in a way that's not cool and can't be talked about by other people.
Exactly, yeah.
And you might end up in Helheim, which is like super cold and dark. Ugh. Kratos had to go there to save Atreus. If folks, okay,
I don't think we need to talk about.
I know. I'm just kidding. Anyway, so Valhalla. So your dad, unfortunately, Kjotve the Cruel. He is cruel. He tells your dad in front of you, like, if you put down your axe and let me kill you like a coward, I will let everyone go. Obviously, that doesn't happen. Your whole family ends up dying. And so you, Eivor, grow up with this like desire to get revenge on this guy, Kjotve. Okay, so that's just setting the stage. I just want everyone to know like kind of what happens before the game kind of kicks off. So as I mentioned, like, you're Eivor, you're this sort of genderless child. And the game asks you to, customize your character shortly after the scene, like kind of tell us what Eivor looks like as an adult. And you can have this option to pick, I hate saying male or female Eivor, so I'm going to say he, him Eivor, or she, her Eivor. And one looks feminine, one looks masculine, like they have different traits, but they're the same character. So you can pick a gender, or you can pick this option where you let the game choose the gender, where it says like let the animus choose the gender. Because Assassin's Creed, long story short, this organization of people has been around for all time, and there's a kind of this other half of the game that happens in the present day, and you're kind of you're going into this machine that lets you experience the memories of people who are long gone, who are also part of this network of assassins. So basically, like, Eivor, you're kind of reliving their life as this other person in the present day. But we don't have to get into that. But essentially, your gender allegedly shifts throughout the course of the game, depending on the strength of spirit or whatever the game decides is emerging in that moment in time is how your gender allegedly manifests. I say allegedly because I've been playing the game for 45 hours and I've only been she, her, Eivor. But I think that's an interesting facet that I'm going to count for the queer community, like this idea that gender is fluid. And I will say, like, the fact that the game experience is not changed, whether or not you're she, her, Eivor, or he, him, Eivor, man or woman, Eivor. Like, I do feel like there's this sort of fluidity in terms of how other characters interact with you. Because you are, like, even though I am she, her, Eivor, like, I'm also like a decorated warrior and I'm a badass and I'm like a leader, a natural leader, and people respond to that. That being said, I do think that some interactions with other characters could be kind of seen in different lights depending on what gender you're playing. Like, there's a male character who very much comes against Eivor as a he bristles at the fact that Eivor is put in place to lead in the absence of your brother Sigurd, who is the Jarl of your settlement. And when you are she, her, Eivor, that comes across as pretty misogynist. Like, he's basically like, who are you to tell us what to do? And it's like, well, I'm a badass and I'm in charge and I've earned this place. I don't know. I just feel like there's this sort of maybe like brotherly competition if you were he, him, Eivor that would come through. But when you're she, her, Eivor, it just seems like super misogynist.
Yeah, he just seems like a dick.
But you have a lot of like, I find that as a warrior, a traveling warrior trying to settle this land, you interact with a lot of people, men and women. And I would say the romance options can be kind of fleeting and probably speaking to the nature of the type of life Eivor leads. But I've had, big burly men come up to me and be like, hey, like, I really respect your fighting style. Like, wanna bang? Like, and I've also had like a huntress who I've gotten really close to. Like, we've formed a relationship. Every time I come home, we like go on a date and hold hands and kiss, and it's awesome. That being said, okay, so that's Mark 2 for the queer community. Like, just like super chill, bisexual, non-binary icon Eivor. Love her. And number 3, there's a surprising prevalence of psychedelics as a way of processing thoughts and coming to personal truths that I was not expecting from this game. There's lots of opportunities that you, the character, have to eat mushrooms that you find in the wild. And these mushrooms trigger these different little kind of mini vision quests that you go on. And when you solve the puzzle, Eivor's trip ends, and it's like a full-on, like, I have to say, I mean, I have not had the opportunity to try mushrooms, but having had other psychedelics, like, the way the screen shifts and the way the colors move and the way you even walk and stagger around as the character, like, it's very immersive. And at the end of these little puzzles, you sort of speak a truth into existence. Like, Eivor is a poet. She's always like coming up with these mini like poems and battle hymns as she rides in, and she's often teased lovingly by her comrades, like, about being like an artist, having an artist's soul. And so when you finish these trips, she kind of kneels down and speaks something. Like, for example, like, after one trip, there's all these fires around, and at the end, she mentions, like, oh, fire, it's like a metaphor for friendships and how they form. And essentially, like, there's an element of truth there in how trips and psychedelics can help you sort of come to realizations. And I think that this sort of inner richness and the poetry that she kind of keeps close to the chest, and this kind of wandering, non-binary butch energy just really gives me a ton of queer vibes. And so I'm having a great time playing Valhalla. I'll just pause there. What have you been playing during the holidays?
Well, let's first start by saying I went into the holidays, as I always do, with this wide-eyed naive. How do you say that word?
Naivete.
Naivete. Thinking that I was going to play my whole backlog. Like, I came into the holidays with like, here's 10 movies that I want to watch and 50 games that I'm going to play, and I'm going to get to them all because there's going to be such an abundance of free time.
Yeah.
And, I always forget that like half of that time is going to be spent just like doom scrolling on my phone or otherwise not putting my time into what I want to put my time into. So yeah, I came in with like this laundry list of games that I want to play. And really what I've ended up playing the most is Persona 5 Royal.
Oh, yes.
I finally got back to it. Our conversation about our games of the year and you talking it up again really reminded me that I needed to get back to that game. And so you can't just dip your toes back into Persona. You're either going whole hog or you're not doing it at all. So I jumped back in, and I wanted to ask you, Persona 5 Royal for me is a spreadsheet game. Like, I've got guides out, I've got spreadsheets open. I'm making sure I'm using my time to the absolute best use of it. Because we talked about the game quite a bit in our game of the year or our games at Gaming in 2020 podcast. So I don't want to belabor it, but you do have periods of free time throughout the day that you can put to use, and you can use that time to hang out with your friends, to build up those relationships and unlock special skills, or you can use that time to work on your own skills. You have different categories of stats that you can work on. So you and different things are only available at different times. So there's a lot of time management to the game. There's this huge time management component. And I get like really obsessive about maxing out that time management and getting the spreadsheets out. So like for me, Persona 5 is a game that like I've got the laptop open next to me with 20 tabs open, and I'm making sure I'm using everything effectively. Do you just go in and just wing it? Like, is that your experience of the game, or is it the exact opposite? Because I feel like we are so opposite that I'm imagining that you just play this game without any guide at all.
Okay. This is my strategy for Persona 5.
Yeah. Okay.
So I should try the guys. That might make me more efficient. But what I do is I too, like, I really live for the social interactions and the day-to-day mundanity of just being a teen in Tokyo. But what I do is so you have to infiltrate these palaces and you have a certain number of days. So I just go in and I tell myself, okay, I'm gonna give it everything I have, and I'm gonna finish this castle in one day. So I just try to finish as many castles as I can in one day, and then I take as many extra days and extra time as I have to, like, honestly, in terms of which confidants do I go for, because there's only a certain amount of time in a day, a certain amount of days in a year. So like you can't conceivably, just like in life, you can't have 20 super close friends. Like, you have to decide who is really important to you and pursue those relationships. And so I just kind of go by my heart. Like I am like, I like you, Ryuji. Like, we're gonna be BFFs. Like, so yeah, I don't. I just play it 4 times.
That's true. Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, so you played through it a lot more than me. I've just, I had the original playthrough, and I didn't use a guide as much in the original playthrough. But going into Royal, I was like, I want to see everything there is to see. Like, I've experienced this story a little bit more, like coming in cold, and like now I want to, I want to get the depth of it. But it makes it, it's definitely made it a little harder to get back into. But then, like, once I fell back into it, like, I'm in all the way. Just the overarching, like, story of the game is so fucking cool. Like, the idea that this group of kids who have kind of been through a bunch of bullshit are ganging together and, like, changing the hearts of corrupt adults. Like, I want it to be real. I want this to be a real possibility that we could do, that we could, like, and the whole idea of, like, the corrupt adults have these internal palaces that are a reflection of their dark desires. And the way the palace gets created is, someone has a moment where their desires get corrupted and they become too focused on one desire. And then they build up this, that's like what corrupts them and makes them a bad person. But by going in and stealing the thing that their treasure, the thing that's created this desire,
It's
that
obsession.
that can give them the ability to atone and recognize and see what they've done. And then they can come clean, and they can be, they can admit what they've done wrong, and they can receive punishment for it and atone for it. And I don't know. It's a really cool overarching narrative. And I do wish like it was real in some sense, so that we could.
Yeah, you don't get to see villains rehabilitated.
Yeah, right? Like, but anyway, I fucking love that game. Building the relationships with all of the characters has been so cool. I'm on the Casino Palace now, which means that I'm almost through what was the original content of the game. And then there's a whole other semester that they added for Royal, and I'm really excited to get there. I really like the 2 new characters they added, Maruki, the counselor, and Kasumi, right? The gymnast. Really excited to see what happens with them and their stories. And it's been a lot of fun. I think I've put another like 60 hours into it over the past 2 weeks. So that's been my work.
How's your curry recipes coming?
Oh, they're going great, man. I love getting that Sojiro relationship to Max. Him and Futaba and that little family that you build there is so cute. For some context, Sojiro is you're a delinquent kid who's been arrested and you have to get sent to a different school because you got expelled from your original one. And Sojiro is like the caretaker that takes you, a guardian who takes you in and lets you live in his coffee shop, so that you can attend this school that's further away from your actual home. And at first, when you first meet him, he's very gruff, very like, telling you to keep your nose clean, basically, and to just shut up and leave him alone and leave everybody else alone and mind your own business and do your work. And then over the course of the game, as you like hang out with him and build a relationship with him, he will teach you how to make, he runs this coffee shop where he makes coffee and curry, and he'll teach you how to make the coffee and curry. And you can get to know him. You can get to know his his adopted daughter, Futaba. And it's just a really heartwarming little story between and you become this little family with the 3 of them.
Yeah. And speaking of the part where you're this like delinquent kid, like something that always fascinated me about the main protagonist of Persona 5 is that you have these piercing eyes. You have these gray piercing eyes, and anyone who looks in your eyes can feel the defiance that's inside of you. Like you live a quiet life, you kind of stick to yourself, but you have this wild, glamorous, kind of trickster persona inside of you called Joker. And people can see that in your eyes. So what you do, your character, when he's walking around during the day, he wears glasses, and the glasses serve to kind of make him look more acceptable, help him blend in, kind of like make him look unassuming. And you learn at some point, I always thought like, oh, he wears glasses, like it just makes sense. He's kind of like a bookish kind of guy, but you learn at some point in the game that the glasses are fake, like they're not real. And he just wears them to make himself blend in. And it kind of it's a small detail that kind of calls into question, like I feel like you two kind of see this character as sort of a nerdy, bumbling, kind of like quiet dude, but like he could be tricking you as well. Like he could just be acting this way to blend in. And I guess that's not a bad thing. I just think he's really cool. So, yeah.
And I mean, well, all of the kids that end up in the group, right? The whole thing is that the whole reason that they can go into the internal worlds, the metaverse, it's called, and go into people's palaces and stuff is because they're persona users. They have the ability to strip away their own masks and like defy what society expects them to be. And in that process, they like bond with these things called personas that are powerful spiritual beings, I guess, right?
Yeah, they're personifications and visualizations of these desires, and they take on the forms of common icons and gods in our collective like human unconscious, because that's how people sort of try to give face to these feelings and emotions that can't always be articulated. So these personas are basically like your own these projections of our collective ideas of certain wrath and rage and violence and cunning and whatever else.
Yeah. But then they're like specific to the individual and how that individual's own defiance is manifesting.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That's just, it's really cool that all of these characters are kind of these like, you know, they're all different they're not on the surface, they can all seem like kind of stereotypes of different types of high school kids. And then as you get to know them and you see them and the ways that they're defying their expectations, then that's where like that depth comes in. But they all have this like hidden secret underneath the surface, right? Of like, they're not just the, you know, the bad boy or the pretty model or the studious like type A teacher's pet. They have this whole other side to them that they get to live out in the metaverse. That's very cool. And, you know, I think it just speaks to like, none of us are just like what we seem on the surface. So,
yeah.
Cool. Well, I think it's time for us to transition over to our wonderful interview today. Our guest today is CelesMeh. Celes describes herself as a Latina queer scientist bringing mental health and gaming together into a diverse community live on Twitch. So she's a scientist by day, a Twitch streamer by night, and just an all-around cool person and mental health advocate 24/7.
Yeah.
We had a really deep and ranging conversation with Celes about what games can teach us on our mental health journeys. And I was very appreciative of her openness about her own personal experiences dealing with her mental health and how games have helped. I think being transparent and honest about those kinds of things can be really validating for other people who are having similar experiences. So really appreciated her just being so open with us, and the conversation goes really deep.
She was awesome.
So without further ado, here's our interview with CelesMeh.
We are in the virtual pixel therapy studio with CelesMeh, who is a amazing Twitch streamer, but I will let her introduce herself. Celes, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How do you spend your time?
Sure. So my name is Celes. Pronouns are she, her. I am a scientist in real life, I guess. So I spend my days doing genetic research specifically around like gene editing. And
for the folks at home who may not know what gene editing is there a way to give us an elevator pitch?
We totally know what it is.
Yeah,
this is just for the people at home.
Oh yeah. Of course. Yeah, no, gotcha there. So every person has their DNA, right? That's the thing that makes up like essentially who you are on a biological level.
The strandy guy.
Yeah, the strandy guy that's twisted. And a few years ago, it was discovered that there were certain ways using this protein called CRISPR that you could go in, cut that DNA, and then like put in what you needed. So a lot of people who have genetic diseases need like that kind of therapy in order to address those genetic diseases, because they can't really be cured in any way. They can only be treated and the symptoms managed. So the research that I do helps to assist in finding new ways to kind of go in, edit that DNA, and hopefully cure people from lifelong diseases.
Are you like in there, like in the strands, like cutting it up, editing?
Kind of like Loki, yeah. So it sounds really cool, but it's really just taking like little droplets of liquid and mixing them together and then running them through like fancy machines to see what happens.
Okay, this sounds like a game that I'd want to play, TBH. Yeah, like, can we make a gene editing simulator?
I feel like they keep trying to do that and then someone like messes it up. Because like I feel like Spore was like a solid like attempt, and then like it came out and it was just the biggest disappointment ever. So like I feel like yes, but also no.
Oh my God, I just had a sudden flashback to Trauma Center, the game where you would do surgery, but also it was like an anime, and like, oh man, that was like one of my first, what was that? Xbox, Dreamcast? I'm trying to remember, but I'm sure gene editing is nothing like that, but I just had a very visceral flashback to scalpeling spiders that were coming out of someone.
I wish it were that cool, but it's honestly not. And for that, I'm a little bit sad, just a little bit.
Well, you make it sound great.
Thanks. So that's basically what I do during the day, and then when I get home from work on Monday, Wednesdays, I play video games online and people watch me. And then on Saturdays, I do a special show that's called Self-Care Saturdays, where I take topics on psychology and mental health and self-care, and I break them down from a scientific perspective and kind of explain them to people, so that I think I've struggled a lot through my own mental health journey, and I got tired at some point or another of having people be like, "Oh, just go outside and do yoga." And like, it's going to be fine. Like, you just need to exercise, breathe, and eat more kale.
The endorphins.
It's so great. And at some point or another, I got sick of that.
Yeah.
And,
why?
Just kidding. I don't know. It's rough. It's rough out there. So I decided to go ahead and start talking to people in the way that I wish someone had like talked to me when I started having like shitty head days, right? Or at least that's what I call them. So on Mondays and Wednesdays, actually now Thursdays, I play like whatever video games are coming out and just kind of hang out with my community. We're mostly like queer, like kind of all suffering from a different mental illness. And it's nice to have that kind of a support group. And then on the weekends, we have the space to talk about that and to like learn more. My official diagnosis is I have a generalized panic disorder, fairly severe. I have chronic depression and ADHD, which they're all comorbid diseases, i.e. like they all kind of feed into each other. And it's I guess it's fun. It's not really fun, but like, it's given me a lot of opportunity to learn and share that with others. So I guess that's neat.
Yeah. And I love to hear you say that, just because as someone who also has comorbid diagnoses, I have generalized anxiety disorder, I have complex PTSD, and I have major depression. And for a long time, I think as like a younger person, I thought there would come a day where I would just get better, because that's what all the commercials showed. And that's what all the people around me said. Like, you exercise, you lose weight, you stop, drinking alcohol, you only eat like raw vegetables, and then magically the depression just stops, it just like cures itself. It's really amazing.
It just gets
positive attitude, right? And then as an adult, like, I feel like I've definitely I've made peace with the fact that I think of it as like, we were talking about Spiritfarer in our last episode, and there's this concept of a dragon that follows a character. And when it shows up and rears its head, it's very scary and traumatizing for this character. And I kind of think of my anxiety that way. Like you said, what did you say? You said bad
head days.
Bad head days. Yeah, I call them like bad brain days, or like, I really resonated with that. And it's this idea of it being a living relationship, but I had to kind of figure that out over years, just sort of by understanding this thing going on in my mind and feeling like it was almost like its own personification, and I had to kind of learn to live with it. And so having community, building community, I think that's amazing. I love how in your Twitch bio, you wrote, "I'm here because I want to be an example that it does get better," which I think is especially a rallying cry that resonates with those of us who, live with mental illness and also identify as queer, or as people of color. And I was wondering if you could say more about like what got you into streaming, like what brought you to Twitch.
Yeah. So I guess a little clarifier, because I realized that only we can see each other. So I'm a Latina woman of color. And when I was growing up, I didn't see anyone like me. And I talk about this a bit more candidly in my stream sometimes, but the truth is that I had this idea that because I was gay, I was a solid disappointment to my parents. So I had this stupid plan that when I reached around 25, I'd just kill myself. And that sounds, sorry, I probably talk about it a bit more like blasé than I should. That's, I think, my way of dealing with that. But yeah, I had this idea that because I am a disappointment, because I am like this, right? And all I grew up with was seeing people who were like, oh, that person is crazy. Oh, she's like a lesbian, and they would like whisper about it and be like, oh, she's such a disappointment because she didn't get married, whatever. And then there were people who tried to enforce corrective measures on me that were not fantastic. And so I left my home country, and I came to the US to study, and I basically had decided that at some point or another I'd be too much of a disappointment because I wouldn't be able to hold it back anymore. And when that happened, I just, stopped. It turns out that's a terrible idea. Just for just to clarify. And when I was a senior in college, I was severely depressed. Couldn't leave my apartment. My friends would actually take shifts watching me because I would do stupid things if they weren't. And this is probably something that we're going to get into a little bit later, but actually playing a game really helped me through that. But another thing that helped me through that was there is this comic artist who makes this comic called Chaos Life. And it's this very adorable comic of like, I think she uses she, her pronouns. I'm not 100% sure, but like her and her wife. And they basically kind of like go through their lives, and it's like stupid things like what their cat threw up that day, or like deciding like how to fix the bathroom when it's broken, whatever. And it was like these small snippets of mundane life. And to me, they were everything, right? Watching these like tiny little bits of like every day was like, oh wow, maybe I could have a wife. Maybe I could have a bathroom that leaks. Maybe I could have a cat that randomly throws up. And they would actually stream their like them drawing the comics. And so I met a couple of people in their stream. Like there were never huge streams. It was like 12 people at most, like, just intimate. Randomly. Yeah, intimate. Exactly. And we would just hang out, and then they talk about different topics. So like I got my like basic like lesbian sex education 101 like by watching them. I also learned that there are a lot of creative uses for candles. Like it was stuff that like, you just kind of had to sit down and listen. And it was this like intimacy and the sense of like community that I hadn't had the chance to experience. Right. And it was in part just because like I didn't seek out any like LGBTQ communities. I didn't seek out any like Latino communities. I just kind of went inward because I was so scared. Right. And so when I started on Twitch, I started because I was playing in like an Overwatch like league. And we wanted to record our gameplay so that we could go back and analyze it later to see where we could improve. And one day, like a random person showed up during the stream, and I was like, "Yo, what's up?" We just started talking, and then suddenly, like it was like 3 or 4 people, and then I just started having like a small community, and then I started doing it more intentionally. So it wasn't just when I was playing Overwatch; it was like an intentional decision. And then I realized like I've been struggling with my mental health for like over 10 years. What if I could help other people struggle a bit less? Right. And I went to a comic book convention in Boston, and there was this one comic artist talking about being like the example that she wished she'd seen. And I was like, oh, I want to do that. Hold on. And I realized that like there aren't a lot of like queer Latina like women that are in positions where they are like, hey, this is my life.
Yeah.
I've managed to do something with it, while at the same time being like, but sometimes it's hard, right? Like it's gotta be a balance, because I think that one of the things that we see a lot in social media is like, oh my God, my life is amazing. And that can be really hard, because you're like, well, what about, why can't I have that? Why can't I look at that and be like, that perfect? And the truth is that like no one is. It's just that you can very selectively post things online, right? So I wanted to be a bit more like out in the open and be like, yo, what's up?
Yeah,
this is like my life, and it sucks sometimes, but like I'm not gonna stop.
Right, you're still here. You're yeah, that's incredible. And I just for the folks at home, the webcomic, it can be found at chaoslife.findchaos.com. And it looks like the author, A. Stifler, does use they, them pronouns, but it looks like a really awesome comic. Folks should definitely check it out. And I think what you said, it's funny, we had another guest on a previous episode talking about Mars Dixon. Hi, Mars, if you're out there, who has us streams as We Gay, and we were talking about The Sims. And he was talking about how, as a young person who was trans and queer, but not in an accepting or welcoming family environment, and they're also Filipinx and Black, a person of color, and just talking about how playing The Sims as a young person and seeing that you could be queer and cook meals together and hang out at home and invite your queer friends over and just have a pizza party sitting around together. Like really, I think as you're talking about the comic, which also has that kind of slice of life examples of like, yes, you can be queer and have the life and live in peace that you want. Like it, like I think we all just want to be able to exist.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
It's so powerful to see like those little tidbits of reality, right? Those small slices of life make things so concrete. I remember the first time that my partner and I went and like decided that we were going to buy furniture together. And it was like, we went to IKEA and like we bought a bunch of random stuff, but on the inside I was like, oh my God, I've made it. Holy shit.
Yeah.
And it was this little thing where it was like, if you'd asked me like 12 years ago, I was like trying to like figure out what was the easiest way to escape my friends so that I could just like be gone and not be a burden anymore. Right. And then like now I'm like living with like 2 cats. I have like a dope job. I've got a dope relationship, and it's not easy, but I like it. That's, kind of the best thing.
Yeah. Ah, okay.
Light stuff, it's fine.
So, Celes, you are a streamer. Do you consider yourself a gamer? Like, what's your personal history with video games?
I consider myself a GAY gamer.
Yes.
For what it's worth. No, but I've been playing. I started playing video games when I was a kid. I'd go to like my neighbor's house and play on their Nintendo 64, and then eventually I got a Game Boy with Kirby's Magic Dreamland, and then afterwards, it's so good. And then afterwards,
what an acid trip
Pokemon,
of a game,
right?
Oh, which Pokemon?
I got Pokemon Red.
Oh, yes.
And then later on, I got Pokemon Blue because some kid at school stole my Pokemon Red. But then I beat him up and almost got kicked out of school.
Oh my God.
Worth it.
I mean, Pokemon was on
in
the
the
line.
4th grade. It was so worth it. But yeah, so I've been playing games for a really long time. When I was in college, I think the game that I was most obsessed with was probably like, I played a lot of Battlefront. I played a lot of Skyrim.
Yes.
But there was this online game called Dofus that I started to play when I was in high school. That it's a French tactical MMO. And basically you go into this world that has like, it's called the World of 12. It's like this heroic fantasy setting, and there's 12 gods and whatever, and your class is determined by essentially like which god you're under, and there's different races based on that. And I started to play that when I was in high school, and I distinctly have like this memory of like for a good year I would go to sleep at 7 p.m., wake up at 3 a.m. I would play games with my friends online while my mom was asleep. And then around like 5 a.m., I'd walk the dog.
Wow.
And then like go to school.
You were living like a CEO at
I know. Kid. What happened? What happened? Where did that discipline go? I don't know.
I know. Where did all the energy go? Like I feel as a kid. Yeah.
It's gone. It's gone. I need neurotransmitters like in a bottle to do that now. Mm-hmm. But you know, at the time when I had the energy, I did that. And then when I got to college, I kind of kept playing it on and off. And actually during that time that I was like very, very not okay, that game honestly was what got me through. And then after I left college, the first thing I bought with my first paycheck for my first real job out of college was an Xbox, so that I could play Skyrim. That was like the first thing, and it was solely because like Skyrim was getting like its updates on the Xbox at the time, so they would get like all the DLC first. And I was like, I want that DLC. I want that vampire life. Like, give it to me, please, mama. Yes. And so that's what I was obsessed with at the time. But yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. So you brought up Dofus. I'd love to kind of go back to that and spend some more time with it. Because that is one of the two games that you mentioned to us, was a game that you've told people has kept you here, a game that was really there for you at a time you were suicidal. And we'd love to hear more, as much as you're willing to share, of course, about your relationship with this game.
So, like, travel back to like senior year of college, right? And I was not okay. My panic disorder was completely out of control. I had tried to kill myself once. It didn't take. And my I had a boyfriend at the time. A big mistake. And I had.
Isn't it always?
It is. And so I'd broken up with him, and I was trying real hard to like just get by. I was having trouble getting like treatment at my school. And I was like solidly on the struggle bus, you know? And it was around Christmas time, the end of the first semester, that I had just stopped going to classes. I barely ate. I didn't really sleep. And I would be at home, and my friends would just kind of sit there and hang out with me and try for me to like not kill myself. And I didn't feel like I enjoyed anything. I didn't feel like I could accomplish anything. Like I was just this bleh of a human being, like dead on the couch, right? And so I started playing Dofus again, and actually my roommate at the time paid for my subscription. And it was the Christmas event, and in the Dofus world, there's an island that appears around Christmas called Quismas Island, KW.
Oh my god!
And it's got rabbits on it. Oh my god! There's a specific like monster that's basically shaped like a rabbit. And you could go and you could complete like all of the Christmas events and get like a special mount and whatever. And there was a guild that let me join them, and I remember the guild leader and her husband, they had like a 10-year-old son who had some kind of genetic disorder. And so he couldn't really play outside. So they would play together as a family. And during the day, while the husband was at work, the wife would basically like go ahead and like level up their characters in parallel. And one of the specific things about Dofus is that you need to have multiple classes together to do a dungeon. You can't just go in and do a dungeon on your own. And it's like around 4 or 5, depending on the dungeon, sometimes more. There are some dungeons that require like 11 people to be there.
Wow.
But there's no like system, or at least at the time, I don't know about right now, but at the time there was no system to like find people. It was just like who you knew and whether or not you could get all of the classes in there to do stuff. And they'd release this new class that I kind of liked, and so I would play with her, and she like lovingly helped me level up. And she was like, no, just help me do this, like let's go ahead. So she would like play on like her computer, like all 3 accounts, and then I would join her, and we'd like go around. And Dofus actually makes it easier to like multi-account. That's actually something that they're oddly known for. And it was this weird thing because to this day, I'm not sure how it happened. And one of the things that I've talked to my therapist about is, and that you'll hear a lot if you suffer from mental illness, is that memory is state dependent, right? When you are depressed, you can only access the memories from other times that you were depressed because those connections are stronger, right? When you are anxious, the memories that you can access the most and easiest are the memories of other times you were anxious because those connections are stronger. And when you're okay, that's part of why you have like such issue being like, oh, when was the last time I wasn't okay? What did I feel when I was panicking? All of that stuff. So memory is state dependent. If you're okay, then the memories you access are from when you're okay. So in the spirit of that, I can't really remember how it happened. But I started playing and kind of accomplishing stuff and like leveling up and whatever. And at some point I was like, wow, I'm like accomplishing something. Like I'm helping, you know? And so I'd finish a dungeon and I would get a tangible reward, right, for the stuff that I was doing. So like I finished this like ridiculous, stupid quest where you had to run around and do a bunch of stuff. And then I got a mount and I had to like I just would go through and slowly like complete certain tasks. And suddenly it was like, oh, hey, I did something. Oh, hey, I accomplished something. Oh, hey, I managed to like, you know, do something. That's cool. And then it kind of gave me almost like this little bit of bravery where it's like, well, what if today, instead of going into that dungeon, I just tried to go into the kitchen and get like some food? What if today, instead of, you know, completing this one quest, I asked my roommate to help me get transportation to a doctor's appointment? What if I could do something?
Yeah.
And that realization of like, maybe I am capable, was so powerful.
Yeah.
And I honestly don't know how else I would have gotten it, because I was so stuck in my own head and in my own fears and in that headspace of just, I am not worthy of anything. And honestly, the only reason that I was playing the game was to pass the time, because if not, it was just me sitting awkwardly with someone who was like low-key trying to pretend they weren't there to hang out with me, like, so I wouldn't kill myself. Like it was this incredibly awkward relationship where it was just like, I know you're just here to watch me and I appreciate that, but I wish you wouldn't. And I don't want to have the awkward conversations that come with that. So I'm just going to play this game. Right. And like my anxiety disorder, when it's uncontrolled, I can't eat. Basically, like anything I eat, I get anxious that I'm going to panic and throw it up. So I panic and I throw up, which lands me in the hospital quite a bit. I have pretty severe agoraphobia. Can't go outside, hate big crowds. People are terrifying. And I was actually recently diagnosed with complex PTSD, but like it makes a lot of sense, but it's one of those things where like I don't like thinking about it. Also, I can't remember a lot of it. But like, go figure. But it was one of those things where like I was trying to come to terms, and that's actually something you mentioned earlier, that realization that your mental illness is kind of stuck with you, right? It's something that you need to like deal with for forever, right? And that kind of like realization and that kind of mourning is its own trauma in and of itself, right? The realization that I am not going to really get better. I'm going to get better at managing. Yes. I am not going to be cured. I'm going to get to a point where I can function. I'm trying to get out of surviving and get into thriving, but that's the best I can do. And I I'm not going to be able to leave this behind and just be cured and be okay.
Mhm.
And the realization that like that is something that you're going to have to do is incredibly difficult. And there's an entire like mourning process associated with it. And then on top of that, like you need to figure out kind of on your own, because nobody can really help you with that like despite those things, life is worth living.
Mhm.
And what it is that you want to live for. And at the time, I didn't really know. Like, I had figured my family's going to hate me when I come out of the closet. So I don't know why I'm going to bother with that.
Mhm.
And like, my friends are only barely tolerating me. So I don't know, like, why I'm going to bother with that, right? I
Mhm.
might as well just like be gone and not be a burden.
Mhm.
And it turns out that what I think about myself and what other people think about me is not always the same thing.
I know it's wild how different that is. Like, and it seems like, you feel like it's so easy to convince yourself, like, this is real. This is what's happening. And I'm
Yeah.
like, why do it confounds me sometimes why people don't like feel the way that I think that they should, that my internal narrative tells me that they are thinking of me.
I had this ridiculous moment with my partner where we sat down to talk about something. And I think it was like the first time that I'd started taking like medication, and I could think ahead, right? And I could think like to the end of the week, like just a week. But like, holy shit. Like the ability to think a week ahead instead of like living in the 10 minutes of panic that I was in every 10 minutes was incredible. And I just like turned to my partner, who's not my partner at the time, just my best friend, because I fell in love with my straight best friend. Who's not so straight. I know, I'm the lesbian dream. So I turned to my partner and I was basically like, is this what it's like?
Yeah.
Is this what it's like to be normal? And she's like, not really, but like close enough. I'm like, oh, thanks. Oh, cool.
Yeah, is this what the neurotypicals wake up to every day?
Yeah,
like,
you know, imagine waking up every morning and not being like having to count like how much energy you have for every single thing you have to do that day. Like having to allocate like little bits of yourself to everything to calculate like, oh, if I do this, will I be okay at the end of the day, or will it be like a bad night? Like imagine not having to do that. Oh God.
And like you're this awesome now, so like imagine all the crap you could get done if that wasn't taking up X% of our brain space, you know?
I'm gonna sit over here and pretend I'm not blushing at that comment. I appreciate that. I've not worked out how to not think that I'm a garbage can. At least I'm a garbage can, not a garbage can't. So I will like take that so with a thank you and just bow out.
Good job. That you did really good at that. Accepting a compliment is the hardest fucking shit in the world.
I hate it so much.
On Dofus, there was one review that I read, and the person wrote, if you like to easily create uber characters and enjoy killing clueless noobs, Dofus probably is not the game for you. But if you want something that's a little offbeat with a heavy reliance on community and group goals, you can do a lot worse than spending $7 to see if you like it. And I think that really, like what you were saying about how the game kind of gave you this space where you could achieve a goal, get a reward, accumulate that, and see like you're capable of taking even these little steps that pile up and pile up and pile up into something more. And not just that, but a lot of these tasks would take, you said like, you know, up to like 11 people. Like that requires communication, that requires caring about someone else. It also means that your actions affect other people.
Yeah.
It's just kind of beautiful that this game, perhaps, I mean, I don't know how intentional it was, but it's almost kind of like group therapy for a lot of people.
Yeah. I mean, what's interesting about it is that like it forces you, like if you want to be better, then you have to work with others, whether you like it or not, right? And I think that another thing that the game does very well is that it does everything with humor. So whoever translated the game for like the US audience, they like inserted puns into everything. Like everything has like a ridiculous theme and stupid puns, and it's just like they don't really take themselves very seriously. And I think that kind of like lightheartedness flows through the community as well, where like if people are like overly serious about something, you won't find people that are like that salty, you know.
Yeah.
You have to really find some like hardcore tryhards, and that's not the easiest thing to do.
Yeah. I feel like in worlds where, like, I feel like so often anonymity can be this breeding ground for hatred, for abuse, for toxicity, depending on the tone that's being set by other people in the community, but also by the game itself. And I kind of love what you're saying about how that energy, that lightheartedness, it really affects and sort of influences who's coming into that space and how they're being in it. Another game that you talked about that you feel like you constantly return to because it's almost cathartic for you was Dark Souls. So for people who are not familiar with Dark Souls, could you maybe say a sentence or two about this punishing game?
Okay. I guess it is a fantasy game that was developed by a Japanese company called From Software. It is kind of made almost in like a fantasy horror genre a little bit. And it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
That's honestly like that's it. You can go through the story, like you can go through the game and not touch the story at all. Just progress the way that the game like kind of tells you sort of to progress, and you don't even need to know the story. If you want to get into the story, like you have to talk to NPCs multiple times so that they'll actually tell you everything. You need to look through like item descriptions. Like if you want to get lost in that, like go ahead. If you just want to like smack things, go ahead. But the kind of important thing that you have to remember is that it's just difficult. And the game's like very punishing. You aren't necessarily it's not like say in like Bayonetta where you're going through and you're just like this uber like bitch queen destroying everything in front of you. Like here you can be like incredibly high level and then a bunch of low level monsters will randomly show up and you were just dead. You're like, well, fuck. Like there's no like easy way to kind of like do it. And then some of the bosses are just, you know, the hardest bosses are the ones that look easiest. So you get these like giant, like destructive monsters and you can figure out their pattern and like kill them. But then there's like these other monsters that like look like people and you're like, I could kill this like bitch in a second. And then you're like, oh no, what's happened? Oh God. And there's a lot of different ways to like build your character. You can be focused on strength, you can be focused on magic, you can be focused on like dexterity, and like you can make this glass cannon that hits really hard, but the second you get smacked, like you're out. Or you can make this character that can handle everything, but they hit really slowly. So like have fun like slogging through the game. But I think that for me, the thing that was I don't know, that's more like that's the most like attractive part of the game is that you can like complete like all of the obstacles in your way. You can like kind of defeat them and get through despite these like overwhelmingly negative odds, right? And it's this thing where you gotta struggle, you gotta take time to learn. Everything is going to murder you, and you know, one of the things that you kind of like learn at the very beginning of the game, there's this one boss that comes out and it's like this big gargoyle demon and it's like surprisingly difficult to kill, and you eventually have to like figure out how to like roll under it between its legs so you can smack away and not get hit by its hits. And then later on you go to another area and that boss is actually just a normal like enemy that you have to face regularly. Yeah. So it's one of those things where like it really does build on your knowledge of the game, but you need to sit and learn and try again. My stream, we've played through Dark Souls. We played through Dark Souls 3 as well. And for Dark Souls 3, we had a death counter in the top right corner. And by the end of the game, without counting like downloadable content, I had died 757 times.
Gosh.
Yep.
I mean, how do you feel like I'm someone who kind of avoids kind of like roguelite games because I do not like the feeling of, and I say this as someone who's obsessed with Hades right now, because
but Hades is like different.
I know,
it
it's completely
different.
It hits different. I've turned it on its head, and it's everything. It's made me love the repetition and the trying and trying again, as you're talking about. But I think I tend to get. I think what you said about depending on the mood you're in, the type of memories you're able to access. Like if I'm perceiving myself as failing in a game over and over again, or sucking, or I can't progress, I think I tend to, it puts me almost in a bad headspace of like, see, you piece of shit. Like there's always this voice in the back of my head that's ready for waiting in the wings for me to do something. So it can be like, see, I told you were trash. I told you.
It was me, deal.
Yeah, exactly. So I tend to avoid these types of games, but with Dark Souls, it's almost like kind of masochistic what draws you, because it doesn't really have any light at the end of the tunnel. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, what do you think, what brings you back over and over again? What brought you to play it to die 700 plus times?
So one of the things that Dark Souls does very, very well is that when you actually accomplish something, like when you win, oh boy, do you feel good. And like you learn, you really do learn. So areas that like are hard and an ambush and you're like depressed, whatever, every time you die, it kind of like resets. And I would argue against calling it a roguelike, because I feel like roguelikes are far more depressed, at least for me, far more depressing, except for Hades. Where you kind of like go in and then all of your progress is reset, right? But it's not really like that with Dark Souls. You keep your levels, you keep your skills, you lose your souls, which is kind of like the currency for almost everything in the game. But you can go back and retrieve those. And you learn over time, like all of the little patterns. So it's this world that constantly resets, but it resets in exactly the same way. So you can be like, and I know this guy's here, so I'm going to kill him preemptively. And I know that guy's over there, so I'm just not even going to walk over there. I don't feel like it. And this guy I can just backstab, and then we're good to go. Right. And once you defeat a boss, that's it. They don't come back. And so once you learn those patterns and once you accomplish something, right, you get to keep that knowledge, those skills, and you get a distinct reward for, whatever it is that you manage to do. And that feeling of like, oh, holy shit, I did it is like addicting to me. Right. And it's addicting in a way that like roguelikes and stuff usually aren't, because it's not just like, I got this one piece of loot, or, oh, I did this thing. It's just like, oh God, I've accomplished something and I've learned something. Like, I feel like I've learned something. Like, it's ridiculous. Right. And it's fun because you can like kind of, apply that to other scenarios in the game. And then there's this other aspect. There is like a multiplayer sort of, and the multiplayer aspect of the game is basically that you can, people will either sign themselves up to help you get through bosses or get through like areas. And you can like summon them, or there's like a PvP aspect where you basically just try to go into a world and kind of screw a guy over. I don't usually do too much of the PvP, but I really enjoy just going through and like helping other people beat bosses. Especially because there's certain bosses that are like a little bit tricky, and it's like, oh, if this is your first time, you don't know that that's going to be hard. Let's do this. And there's always something like really fun about having like someone who's like an expert in this one boss be like, all right, you just sit over there, kiddo. I'm going to take care of this. And it's just like, it's fantastic. And it's this weird sense of community because you can't talk to the person. All you can do is like mime different like emotes and maybe like say like one word using like this special item that like literally lets you say like a word.
Wow.
But there's this like weird sense of camaraderie where you're just like, oh, I know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Let's do this. Like, let's hang out. And it's I don't know. For me, it's fun. And the unifying factor for a lot of people is just that it's hard. And like, we kind of enjoy that weird masochism, I guess. But what you get at the end is just the sense of accomplishment. And I'm not talking like the EA like sense of accomplishment when you unlocked it. Like, no. You get an actual like, oh my God, I've managed to do something.
I did
feel
that.
Like I've learned something. Yeah. Like that was me. That bitch right there.
Yeah.
That was me. And it feels nice.
Yeah. And so we've been talking a lot about the link between gaming, two very different games, but in how they can sort of interact with and maybe even help us move through, cope with depression, anxiety, panic. I was actually like doing some reading online, and I had found that there were 2 studies actually done in 2017 of sort of exploring video games as a treatment or aid for folks living with depression. One was with 10 adults who were actually over the age of 60, and the other was with over 600 participants who were given a mobile gaming app that had, like we talking about in Dofus, it was actually based on small tasks with like simple goals, and as they completed them, they would get like a feedback reward. These are published in the first was published in the Journal of Depression and Anxiety, and the second, with the one with 600 participants, was published in a journal called the Journal of Medical Internet Research, which sounds so fucking fake, but it has a website, and it is the leading peer-reviewed journal for digital medicine and healthcare in the internet age. But something about the name Journal of Medical Internet Research sounds like someone sitting and typing things into MD. Anyway,
copy pasting.
It's like, and it turns out that you have cancer, good sir.
Yeah.
So let's get on with that.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
But what these studies found was that there were groups that played with the apps for at least 20 minutes 5 times per week, and then there were groups that just went to weekly therapy. And then there was a third group that played with a placebo, some sort of placebo game. I wonder what that is. Is it just a screen that has nothing in it? Like, I'm kind of like, I want to know more about that. It's made of paper. It's like a paper prototype. Anyway, but for participants who were actually... experiencing moderate to severe depression, they saw greater improvements in their symptoms playing with the non-placebo apps than those who were not depressed or who were only mildly depressed. And so, I don't know, I was reading that, and it just was I just think it was interesting because before we even spoke, like this idea of when you shared your story of how this game modeled for you, like what the steps you could take in your own life, like, and when we were talking about just as young queer people, like looking to games to see examples of, oh, hey, like there's an example to model that could be me in my own life. It's like without even trying, like games can really be places where, I think because you're so deeply engaged with it, like you're really putting yourself into this character, you're taking these actions, you're living in this world, like it just feels like a much more tactile way of visualizing a different feature than what you might experience just talking to someone in therapy.
So one of the things that I actually experienced was I was diagnosed with ADHD actually like 3 years ago. And it basically was that my partner works in education. She came up to me one day and was like, hey, so I'm learning about how to identify students that have ADHD in the classroom. And it turns out that this sounds a whole lot like you. And I was like, oh, okay. And I remember being deeply offended at the time because I didn't know that much about ADHD. Yeah. And I was like, this bitch is coming in here telling me I got ADHD, being like, you can't pay attention to shit. And as I began to learn more and eventually got my diagnosis, it was this like moment of like, oh snap, that might have been me all along. And it was also, again, talking about this kind of time of mourning, right? Where I was like, oh God, what if I discovered this earlier? Would I be a better would I not have struggled as much? Like there was this like, holy shit, I am like almost 30. I've just been diagnosed. What if I'd been diagnosed when I was 12? Would I not have struggled this much? And that's its own weird, like, oh my God, I hate the world sort of feeling. But one of the things that we discovered afterwards is that a great way to address my ADHD and a great way to address my mental health is actually just gamification. So a lot of those aspects that make games engaging and that make me like be able to kind of understand and play these games, right? Those things can be applied to different aspects in real life. And you can accomplish things and see progress in your life using those same kind of like, different strategies. So like one of the things we did is that we had a chore chart, but like depending on the stuff that I did, I was able to open like a chest at the end of the week. And like that chest would have a random gift that my girlfriend had randomly found at like Target.
Oh my God.
I know. It's really cute.
But it's so gay.
It is so gay. I know. It's fine. We're a stereotype. We drive a Subaru. It's fine.
Me too. What color is yours?
Gray.
Okay, mine's orange, so mine's gayer than yours.
It's
not
fine.
that it's a competition.
Not that it's a competition, but we also have like our bike rack in the back for like two street bikes that are kind of vintage street bikes. So like I hear what you're saying, but like bring out the flannel bit.
Yeah, you hear me and you raise me to bike racks and vintage bikes. Yeah, all right, I'll stand down.
Just saying. No, but it was one of those things that like we found ways to take the things that I engage with most in games and apply them to real life so that I could like focus on some of the things that I struggled the most with. And I think that that's something that games do that like no other media can do, is just that engagement where you have direct feedback for whatever action you take. And that's part of what makes them so powerful.
Yeah.
Celes, thank you so much for joining us. We've had a lovely time. The time has just flown by.
It really has.
Where can folks find you online? Is there anything you're up to lately that you'd like folks to know about?
Sure. So online, I am CelesMeh, CelesMeh. I am that on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok, on Twitch. Like literally, I cornered the market on that one name. I'm sticking to it.
Lock it down.
Yeah. Oh, locked and loaded. But right now, one of the things that I'm kind of working on is changing a little bit how we do our community days and stuff to get people more engaged. We've had this kind of like community for a very long time and not a lot had changed. And now I'm just trying like new things and getting people like more excited and having people be more engaged in their mental health, and then reaching out to other Latino creators, other queer creators, and doing these panels where we kind of discuss a lot of the topics that are important to us, that are difficult about our existence very specifically. So if you're interested in panel discussions, you're interested in science, you're interested in mental health, or you're interested in games, just come find me. I'll probably be bitching online about something, so it'll be fine.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Celes.
Thank you.
Time is up for today's session of Pixel Therapy. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope that listening to our thoughts and feelings gave you some thoughts and feelings of your own. If you want to be like Yinka, Val, and the rest of our growing Patreon community, you can come check us out at patreon.com/pixeltherapypod, where you can get a monthly bonus episode for just $2 a month, plus opportunities to get involved with the community and influence the show directly. If you're not up for contributing monetarily, but you enjoyed this episode, there are lots of ways you can support us for free, including following us on Instagram and other social media at Pixel Therapy Pod, or leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts. That stuff is just as important, and we appreciate it just as much. If you want to reach out to us, you can send us an email at pixeltherapypod@gmail.com, and you can keep up with all things Pixel Therapy by checking out our brand new website at pixeltherapypod.com.
Finally, since we like to put our money and our energy where our mouth is, we like to end every episode with a recommended side quest. Just think of them as ways that you can get involved locally, internationally, wherever, all over the place. This week, Celes let us know about a really cool organization that we wanted to share with you. It's called Take This. You can find them at takethis.org. And essentially, it's an organization that's gathered around the mission of providing comprehensive resources, support, and consultation that's tailored for the unique needs of the game development community. 1 in 2 people will be diagnosed with a mental health condition in their lifetime. And especially in the video game community, it's pretty common that people think that no one will miss them if they're gone. People who feel isolated, people who feel alone. A lot of us turn to video games for lots of different reasons. So Take This was founded to let people know that they're not alone and that there is help for people with mental health challenges who are also passionate about making and playing games. So you can donate, you can learn more about their programs and resources. You can even check out their consulting and training offerings. And that's, again, Take This, found at takethis.org. That's TAKETHIS.org.
Thank you for that side quest, Spencer. That is our show for today. So go forth, run a story mission, level up some stats, and don't forget to hug an NPC every now and then. We'll be back soon with some more Pixel Therapy. Yeah. Bye-bye.